everybody, Will here from Downtime Activities, back with yet another RPG review. A couple of months ago, a wonderful viewer on the channel reached out to us and asked if we'd like to review the RPG system that he was working on, and we were obviously quite happy to do that. Ended up being a little later than we thought. The past couple of months have been kind of brutal for us scheduling-wise, but we're finally here, so I apologize profusely for it being late. This is a really pretty neat little RPG. It's a pretty compact rule set. It is a little complex, but what it's trying to do and the hole that it's filling is, as far as I'm aware, completely unique within the world of tabletop RPGs. The system we're going over today is the Nostalgia system, which is kind of a catch-all rule set. It's at least really up to you the type of stories that are being told, and the creator of this system is actively running a really large-scale online game, which would be impossible if this system isn't what it is. So let's go ahead and get into it.
The Nostalgia system is one that seems to me to be completely unique, at least in its core intention, and it is a system that is revealing a rather large hole in the world of tabletop RPGs, and trying to fill that gap. Tabletop RPGs are extremely varied, and it's part of what makes them so much fun. There's a system for essentially every playgroup, from the long-standing titans like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, which are essentially played as stories stretching out over many months or even years, to shorter, more rules-light games like Fiasco or Dread, which tell a single story over the course of a couple of hours. There are systems for almost every setting, from high fantasy, sci-fi, gritty crime dramas, superheroes, or systems that are simply catch-all rule sets like Savage Worlds, so they can fit any setting. There is, however, a hole in the world of tabletop RPGs, and one that I wasn't really aware of until we were asked to take a look at the Nostalgia system. Like our regular reviews, I'm gonna just try and give a basic overview of the system here, touch on character creation and some of the core gameplay, but a lot of what I want to talk about is the core idea behind Nostalgia, and why I think more people should be exploring systems like this. Nostalgia is holding a profound blank spot up to the light and trying to fill it, and that is worth focusing on. Nostalgia is a tabletop RPG, although a slightly different one. It has been described as being akin to fantasy football in the style of its play. Not that you'll be drafting heroes and they'll be battling it out each week, but in the sense of the long-form style of its play. It was meant for playgroups who have a hard time scheduling times to meet, or for playgroups spread out across the world. In fact, the players and the Game Master never meet up at all, and essentially 100 players could be in the same campaign, which we'll get to later, without any issues, because being a player in this rule set is largely a solitary experience. By the base rules, players take only 2 turns a month, or more accurately, they take 1 turn every 2 weeks. The idea here is that the Game Master can send out the latest update to that player, which is done as a sort of block of writing, and the players have a whole week to respond, getting to it whenever they have time. Then the Game Master has a week to respond in turn, and this continues on back and forth as long as the character survives or the story is being told. You could compress or lengthen the schedule as needed to fit your group, but the core idea here is to give both the player and the GM enough time to take their turn and respond without having to set aside several hours every week to play. The creator of this system actually has an ongoing game that's available to join that runs entirely online. I get the idea that it's kind of a passion project and to some degrees a writing project, but there's nothing wrong with that. Good RPG campaigns should be a passion project for the person running them, because that's when the best work is done. This game takes place in Italy and Sicily during the height of the Black Death, with the characters exploring a detailed, historically inspired setting, and if you're interested in this system but don't want to get a group together to play yourself, this is a totally valid option to get involved in the game. Alright, let's take a quick look at character creation here. Characters aren't made quite the same way as characters in a lot of other RPGs. As a player, you don't actually get all that much direct control over the creation, and this is intentional. At least by the default Nostalgia setup, you're not supposed to know much about yourself at all. Part of the point of play is discovering the skills and abilities you have, and finding or breaking the limits of what you are capable of. There are classes, skills, and some abilities and scores, but a lot of this is hidden to the players, and they don't choose any of it. The player answers a questionnaire written by the GM that helps the GM determine what type of person the player is, fitting them into a class and assigning them skills and abilities. You're encouraged to answer these questions honestly, but are also given the choice to purposefully conceal or obfuscate some of your answers, especially if you're not comfortable answering them. This is all just intended to help the GM determine the class of your character and to better know how to guide you over the course of play. And like any RPG, the rules are pretty bendable here. Adapt them to fit your particular needs. This method is going to be somewhat controversial to different playgroups, I'm sure. Some players won't have any problem with this at all, or might even be excited by the idea of not knowing just what they're capable of doing and have to slowly discover their own powers and abilities. Others won't want to relinquish that amount of control, and I understand. Part of what I like about being a player in TTRPGs is only having control of, by and large, a single player. It's the vessel through which we interact with and experience the world, and it's the one bit of it we actually get to tailor and create from the ground up. That said, I also like the idea here of having to discover a character for myself as I play. Not only am I exploring and experiencing the world, but exploring and experiencing myself through the same process. This won't work for every playgroup and won't work for every story, but this is how the system is designed to work. Your character has a class and a set of skills. In the game that the creator is running, I don't actually know what all the classes are, but these classes and skills should match your game. You can acquire new skills by training in them or using them often enough, and some new abilities will work that same way. Skills have ranks, from unknown up to master, and the default skill list includes things like a whole swath of basic crafting skills, physical skills like long-distance running, and survival skills like fire or tracking. There are a lot more specific skills in actual play, but these are the base ones covered in the rules handout. At the heart of your character stats are stamina, health, spirit, and nostalgia. Stamina is spent to do certain actions and can be lost in a variety of ways. It's also the easiest stat to recover. Health is pretty self-explanatory, and spirit is a lot like a mental fortitude stat. Nostalgia, where the system gets its name, is meant to reflect things your character remembers. Anytime you find an object or place tied to a point of nostalgia, it's described as your character finding something that feels familiar to them, giving a little more insight into who they are. When your health points run out, you start losing nostalgia instead, and when you lose all nostalgia, your character is lost forever. Nostalgia should be a rare and precious resource. Characters flooded with nostalgia are essentially invincible, and it removes a lot of the slow-burning mystery and threat that should be a part of these games. When interacting with the world, much of this is done through the use of writing, although the rules mention that the amount of writing you do can be up to your playgroup. A player's turn essentially covers 7 days, and traveling between marked locations on the map, called nodes, will take a certain number of days, while moving to a new area or map entirely will take longer. You can rest for some number of days, explore the area you're in, or use those days to hone skills or work at a task. Being more familiar with an area makes tasks easier, and makes the descriptions you are given more concrete. The Game Master sends out a chunk of writing when your turn begins, and this block of writing is meant to describe where you are, what you can see, and what you can interact with, as well as giving just a general update on your character. Untreated wounds get worse, treated wounds begin to heal, etc. Most of this will be written in plain black text. Anything in blue text is something the player can interact with, and anything in orange text is a place the players can travel to without spending a day to do so. Players can only interact with 3 blue text objects per turn, and can only travel to 1 orange text location per turn, but you can travel to more places if you spend the days required to do so. Brown colored text begins to replace blue or orange text if the character is becoming disoriented, making it unclear whether it's an object or a place they're moving towards. And the more disoriented the character is, the more brown text will appear, and the more chaotic the writing will become. Just because something isn't in a colored text doesn't mean it's off limits, it just requires the GM and the player to be reasonable about it. Obviously, this all sounds a little complex, and I do think the system is a little bit of a brain bender at times, but the rule set we were given does have lots of templates and examples for nearly everything, which are invaluable in parsing out how it's intended to work. Like I said earlier, what I really want to focus on here is the core concept behind this system. The idea of a long-form tabletop RPG that runs almost like a fantasy football league, where you check in on it every week, is actually a really good one. A lot of playgroups suffer because of scheduling issues, and campaigns have been abandoned completely, not because the playgroup wasn't enjoying it, but because they just couldn't find the time to meet for so long that the campaign just withered up and died. Hell, this video is so late in coming out, partially just because of these exact same scheduling issues, which have been plaguing every single campaign we've done on the channel. Anytime there's a gap in our recordings, it's because we just can't find the time to meet up and get some work done. I don't know of any other system trying to do this same thing. If you do, let us know down in the comments. I really want to check that out. This is a profoundly interesting idea, and it's one that needs to be explored. The nostalgia system is trying to fill that gap on its own, and if nothing else, has demonstrated that there is a sizable hole in the world of tabletop RPG rule sets. People who don't have the time to meet up every week, or playgroups that can't schedule a good time, could get a lot of use out of something like this. A very good friend of ours, who has yet to appear on the channel, has been insanely busy for the past year or so, and unable, almost all through that time, to play in any of our campaigns. Something like this, which requires just a turn every 2 weeks, would help to scratch that itch without needing the same amount of time on his end. This system is still some work for the Game Master, but it can be spread out over the course of a week, fitting into 5 or 10 minute chunks at a time in order to get the writing done for the next turn. As long as your Game Master isn't the busiest of the people playing, it shouldn't be any real hassle at all. The nostalgia system was made for people who enjoy writing, and who need a tabletop system that doesn't require scheduling or several hours at a time to play. The nostalgia system allows many players to participate in the same game with only minimal effort, and the slow pace and long form of its play is perfect for telling stories that rely more on emotional experiences and exploration than action scenes and set-piece battles.
Well, that has been our review of the nostalgia system. Obviously, when we've done these RPG reviews in the past, we like to bring in players and have them talk about their impressions of the systems and what they liked about them. Unfortunately, again, because of all the scheduling issues we've been having right now, and all the scheduling issues we're about to start having, you can blame the guy behind the camera for that. We couldn't actually do that on this one. I do apologize for that, but I think if anything it reinforces why a system like this is a good idea. I do want to be clear that we weren't paid or anything for this review. The creator of the system didn't provide anything other than the core rule set for us to take a look at. I think this system is really filling a pretty big niche in the tabletop RPG market, and it's really sort of exposing a gap that I didn't know was there until this rule system was presented for us. I really like the idea of a sort of fantasy football style tabletop RPG that's, you're only interacting with it kind of over the course of a week, but it's allowing the players and the DM to find the time to do it without having to schedule 2 or 3 hours at a time to do it. If you're interested in the existing campaign that the creator is running, or just looking into more of the system at all, we'll throw a link down in the description to where you can find more of that type of stuff. And if you have any comments about this type of stuff or know of any other systems like it, let us know. I really want to explore more stuff like this. I think it's an absolutely fascinating concept. And any comments, likes, or if you feel like subscribing, anything like that really does help us out a lot as a tiny channel. Now, as always, go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities.